Hello everyone, my name is Jeff Neville and welcome to Selective Imagery. Welcome to an interesting journey with the 1957 Leica M3 rangefinder. Hello everybody. Surprise, surprise. I'm sure you weren't expecting the title that you saw in this video, along with a few video clips of the purchase of a 1957 Leica M3 rangefinder camera. For those of you who know me, I'm like many of you. I'm a serious amateur photographer that enjoys capturing special moments and events and experiences in life. I often tout my self-proclaimed motto, enjoy life, capture some of it, in a lot of the videos I do. And while my current shooting genre is primarily birding, mainly because I live in Myrtle Beach now, so you have to shoot what's available. So it's primarily birding, some macro shots, flowers and insects, and some street photography now and then, and some night photography too. And I've been shooting probably since I was about 7 years old with my mom's cameras. And that's how it all started. And that's how I caught this disease of wanting to, well, own cameras, use cameras, take a lot of pictures with the cameras. As you can see behind me, I have a small collection. I have cameras that vary in age from, the late 1800s up to the Nikon Z9 and the Z8. Now, I recently went into an establishment that and I had the opportunity to examine a group of cameras, perspective acquisitions from the 50s to 70s time frame. And after looking at everything, I ended up purchasing 4 cameras. And I talked to the owner for quite a while. I mean, I think we had a good connection. We got along. And as I paid for everything, he says to me, do you have any interest in Leica? And I think I had a big smile on my face, and I paused, and I said, well, I don't have to worry about that. I could never afford one anyway. He responded, I think you can. So the shop owner proceeded to go in the back room and come back with an original Leica camera bag and put it in front of me on the counter and said, take a look at it, see what you think. So inside was the 1957 M3, Leica M3 rangefinder, with 5 lenses, some filters, and a few other trinkets and a couple manuals. And it also had a light meter on it. So I threw out a number off the top of my head because I was trying to prod him for the number, and he didn't want to give it to me. He wanted to hear me first. And I think part of that was a test to see if I was a serious buyer, make sure I wasn't just some schmuck that was going to try to, say, oh, it's only worth $300 or something ridiculous like that. And he wanted to see if I was in the ballpark and that I was respectful for what it was that he was showing me. And I gave him an offer, telling him I never priced out this particular lineup of Leica product because I used to look at, maybe buying a Leica 3 from the, late 40s or, an R5 or one of 2. I think there were 2 models of SLR Leicas that I had an interest in, which I have yet to find one that I want to buy. But anyway, threw out a number, and he said no, and I'm like, uh-oh. And then he said, here's what I'll sell it to you for, and he actually gave me an even better deal on it than what I offered him. A very class act of a gentleman, and the deal was done. And it was just important to him having this particular product in his possession for like the last 15 years. He had only shown it to a handful of people over the 15 years. It was important to him that it went to someone who appreciated what it was, wasn't just going to flip it, sell it on eBay or whatever. And we had a good, like I said, we had a good rapport, and I think it went well. And he accepted he told me what he would take for it, and we shook on it, and the deal was done. And so this is where the journey begins. So the first thing I did was when I went back to the shop. There was a week between seeing it the first time and then thinking about things and then going back. And I asked him, can I, clean the camera? Can I do some cleaning? I brought my cleaning kit with me, a whole bunch of supplies. And he said, sure. So he was extremely gracious. And I spent hours there cleaning stuff. Just wanted to make sure the lenses weren't in horrible condition, that they were usable. And like I said, the deal worked out, and I'm the proud owner of it now. And then even when I got home, I re-cleaned again. I mean, if you guys know me, which some of you do, I'm kind of a stickler for certain things. So here I am with the Leica M3, and you know, I have cleaned the body and cleaned all the lenses that I have in the kit, and new battery in the exposure meter. I went out and I shot a 36 exposure roll, basically because the leatherette, the covering on the camera on this back plate, basically disintegrated when I touched it. What I've decided to do is I'm going to remove the covering from the entire camera, and I have replacement leatherette on order. Once I get that, I will put a new leather covering on this camera body. And just so you know what I did on the back, I mean, most of it just kind of flaked off, but of course you have the residue left behind. So what I did was I have an X-Acto knife blade that I have various assorted blade shapes that I could use. So I used this, which is basically like a chisel, okay? And I basically scraped the residue off with this, and then I cleaned the area with, I use 91% isopropyl alcohol, you know, dampen a lint-free cloth, or sometimes I might have to scrub it a little bit. I use a Q-tip or what have you, or alcohol wipes you could use as well. Now, if it really, really is tough to get off, which it won't be if you're scraping it off with this, but some people go a different route. They use acetone, and which may or may not be hard to get where you live. You could also use lighter fluid, will help remove it. But always follow that up with a rinse of the alcohol. So I am going to be doing a video. I'll share a little part of it and how long it takes me to do. I will show how I'm going to remove the leatherette. There's one little corner here that you can see where it's chipped. It wasn't that big. I kind of flicked it a little bit with the X-Acto knife and got a little more to break off, and it's basically going to be flaking off a little at a time, and then removing the residue and cleaning it up and preparing it for the leatherette. So I'll have a video where I'm just filming. You're going to just see my hands and my tools or whatever trying to remove this material, and I'll show bits and pieces of it and give you an idea of how long it took me to do it. To clean this surface up and scrape it and clean it good and get rid of the glue around this edge around this ring. I'm guessing I was very careful. Maybe it took me 20 minutes. Okay, so we'll see how long it takes to do the rest of the camera. And we'll be back in a bit showing that. So here I am. I'm going to start using this little pick tool here. I'm going to work on this area here and flick some of this material off. And I'll go so far. I'll stop the video. I'm not going to film the whole thing. And I'll keep track of the time. And we'll see how long it takes me to strip this covering off of this camera. So I'm just going to, when you're doing this material is literally going to fly everywhere. And in some cases, this tool may work good. In other cases, it may not work so good. So a lot of it's gonna depend on how good the glue is. This could take quite a bit of time. I could try the X-Acto knife a little bit if I need to see if that works a little bit better. We'll see. Okay, keep this thing in focus. Make sure that I don't slide it towards my hand. Last thing I want is to be slipping and cutting my finger. Okay. Got to be really careful. You can probably hear it grinding away here. Try to. The knife seems to be doing a better job than the pick at the moment anyway. But like I said, you got to be careful. Last thing I want to do, especially being on blood thinner, is slip with this knife and have it dig into me. You know, with the knife you are going to scratch, put a little bit of scratches in the body, but that's to be expected. You just have to be careful with what you're doing. I'll try to move this so you can see a little bit more of what's been removed here. Okay, this is obviously going to take a while. We're going to stop the video here while I work on this, and I'll show you as we move along. So here we are 27 minutes later after I started all this, and you can see that I basically have, I would say, a little more than half of it removed. I mean, I still have to use a solvent to get some of the adhesive residue off, but it's moving along nicely. And then what you find out too, you learn a lot as you're taking this off in terms of how it may affect what you want to do when you put on the new covering, is that it does peel off easier when you get to the edges and when you get around all the switches, whether it be the self timer or the frame lever on this side. That's where you can tell it's a little looser. So what I may do when I put the new one on is brush on some adhesive around some of these areas and let it get tacky before I actually put the new one on, just to make sure I have an even better seal with the new leather than the old one had. But some areas are around the rounded areas, the edges, like right in here, that was stuck on like cement. I'll tell you, and it's very brittle. You could see the pile, the little pile of debris here, and it's all over the desk, on the floor. It flies everywhere. And if you don't wear glasses, I would suggest strongly that you put some goggles on, because this stuff will splinter and fly off, and you don't want to get any of it in your eye. So we will come back when I have all this removed and show it to you and cleaned up, along with how long it took to do it. So here we are, total time, let's see, 40 minutes. 40 minutes to scrape off everything off the camera. Now I still got a little cleanup to do, and but you can see here that here's the back plate. So the corner is all done, all the way across the frame lever. Well, no, that's the self timer. Lens release, framing lever over here. Go around the corner and back to the back plate, and it's all done. So I got to use some solvent now and some scrubbing and clean it up. But basically in 40 minutes I was able to remove the covering. For never having done it before, I'm pretty pleased with that. But now I got to vacuum and clean up all this debris that's all over literally all over the floor in my room here. And I'll come back in a little bit. Okay, so here we are. I got some Q-tips and I soaked them in some lighter fluid, and that softened up a little bit more of the remnants. And then I scraped it again with the X-Acto knife a little bit, and then I cleaned the area with isopropyl alcohol. And I think it is more than prepped well enough to be ready for the new leather. Okay. So now we wait for it to show up, and then I will do some video of when I put that new leather on this camera, and it'll look like brand new. We'll see you down the road. So here we are. I got the leatherette, and this is the back view of the M3, and obviously this whole area in here, all around this circle, there's a cutout. This whole area has to have a new piece of leather on it, as well as, you know, the sides and all this area in the front. So first I'll show you what the kit looks like from Japan. And you basically get two pieces. You only need one. They send you two back rear pieces for that rear panel, and then you get the one long piece for the front. And you can see when I hold this up that when you get to where the bottom of the lens would be, there is not much leather here. It is very, very, very thin. And you know, you have your cutout for your, these are the cutouts for your Buddha ears, and these small holes are for your screws. And then this is the self timer with the button that you push to activate it. This is your lens release button. Then you got a few more screws over here, and you know, and then you also have another Buddha ear, and so on and so forth. But this is the one that's going to be much trickier. But because I'm nervous, never having done this before, I'm obviously going to start with what should be the easiest of the bunch and worry about the back. So what I've already done to the back of the camera, because I had it sitting out, you know, on the desk that I'm working from right now, is I cleaned any area that's going to have this leather applied with an alcohol wipe. Just in case there was a little bit of dust on the body, I wanted to get rid of it. And I want to make it, this outer ring, okay, is embedded, you know, into the body. This ring on the top, it does not rotate. The only part that rotates is this center. You push it down and turn it to line up, you know, what your ASA or DIN number is for your film. It's just a reminder thing, not overly important. But neither one of these surfaces move. They're fixed. The only thing that moves is you push and turn this small button in the middle. So I think what I'm going to do is I have an artist pen here, and I have my can of 3M. Let me try to get down here. Okay, 3M Super 77 multi-purpose adhesive. And what I'm going to do is I am just going to brush a little bit on this surface, on this outer ring, and slightly inward to the edge all around, and I'm going to let it get tacky. I'll put a little extra on these screws, because those are all areas where, you know, they're along the edges, these screws, where you want to make sure you have plenty of adhesive so it doesn't lift up anytime in the future. So that's just what I'm doing. You know, what the experts would say to do, I don't know. I watched the video that came with this, which was a generic video on changing the leather on an Olympus OM series camera. So obviously every camera is different, and this is just what I'm choosing to do. Now I preliminarily just laid the leather covering here, and looks like a perfect fit. I don't think it's going to be overly difficult, especially for this back piece. So I'm going to start by shaking up this can, spraying a little bit of adhesive on a piece of paper towel. And then, like I said, I have a very small artist brush, and I'm just going to dip it in that, and I'm going to go around and just put it where I kind of want a little bit of extra glue without getting overly carried away. And I don't know that you really have to do this, but I've always been someone that's, you know, the old saying, I'd rather be safe than sorry. And give it a little extra attention rather than not enough. And this stuff's going to dry or get tacky pretty quick, so I got to kind of do this fast and go along the edges. And on the screws. Not worrying about being super exact with anything. And like I said, it's just to make me feel a little bit more comfortable that I don't have to worry about this stuff coming off on me, as long as I own this camera anyway. Okay. I got my dog next to me who's hacking a little bit here. So now here's where I guess the moment of truth is. And I'm going to carefully peel off this leather material. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick it along the edge. And okay, it seems like it's a little bit short to me. I don't know. I don't know if this material, is going to stretch at all. But it seems like it's a little bit, that it could have been cut a little bit bigger. So the last thing I need is for it to be off. Yeah, and it's already getting very, 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 very sticky. And alrighty. I'm rubbing my fingernail here to get it underneath this outer ring. And it is tight, and you gotta move it around. You don't want to see a gap. Like I said, I wish it was a little bit cut slightly larger widthwise. I could use the end of the rub a little extra around here with the end of the brush. But well, here we go. I think that looks pretty good. Well, that didn't take very long. Okay, now I'm gonna pause this video for a second while I kind of like dry fit the other piece or figure out what I'm gonna do with the main piece of this thing. But it looks like the back looks pretty darn nice. Okay, so now I got to worry about the front, which is going to be more difficult. And what I did was I sliced off this extra rear piece and the backing material that it's stuck on. And then what I did was I scored. I'm worried about, I don't want the whole thing to be sticky. And I think because this is more complicated in terms of positioning and alignment, that I'm not going to add any extra glue because if it sets too quick, I'm screwed. And I got one shot at this. So what I decided to do is, like I said, I followed along the edge and I flipped it over and I said, okay, I want to make sure that the switches and the holes for the screws, that's the critical part. I just want to remove the backing from this area and work with this and not have the whole thing sticky. So what I'm going to do, as you can see, I kiss cut, okay? No damage to the leather, okay? I went and I put a slice on each side. That's going to allow me to work with that little window. Okay, right in here that I'm talking about. And I'm going to hold my breath and hope I don't totally screw it up. And like I said, I did wipe down the camera body with alcohol. If I see any little bit of debris here, I'll scrape it with this knife. There seemed to be just a little bit here. Um, so I guess here we go. And the thing is, like, I have to, these holes here, these bigger holes, okay, here, here, and here for the switches, I have to kind of slide the leather down behind the switch and hope I get everything lined up. So this is going to be a little tedious. This is going to be a little bit nerve-wracking, to say the least. I'll try the one side first. No, I can't do it that way. Can't do the one side first trick. You gotta kind of slide it down both. You gotta kind of slide it down both sides at the same time. This is definitely difficult. Yes, it's definitely dangerous. It's definitely this is like scary shit, man. This really is. This is basically heart attack on a plate territory. I hate to say that I might have to trim this a little bit around this rewind lever. I'm very nervous to do any kind of trimming at all. Damn. I'm having to trim a very, very small amount of the leather, which is definitely freaking me out. Trying to run my fingernails around the screw holes and make sure that it's seated down good around the screws. Using whatever means I have to ensure that it is on there securely. You got to be really, really careful with this. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fool with this a little bit and then come back to the video. Okay, here we are back again. So here's where we are. We've got everything done. Okay, everything done around the rewind knob. Okay, everything done around the rewind knob. Right here, self timer, lens release, frame line lever. And you can see where I didn't take the backing off. And I think this was a real good idea to do it this way. Don't remove any more of the backing. It makes it harder to work with. If any of this area out here was sticking while I'm trying to work it around these switches and levers and whatever, and around the screws, I think that would have been a real, to say pain in the you-know-what, would be putting it mildly. So now I should be able to just peel off, okay, the remaining and wrap that around and do the same thing on the other side. So we're going to see if that's as friendly as I hope it is. I mean, doing the best we can, pushing it around the ear, you know. It's hard to say that that everything is line on line perfect. I mean, it's close. I mean, you got tolerances, you know. You got tolerances with the camera. You got tolerances with the template. I mean, I try to put my fingernails around every possible, you know, use my fingernails, use the dull side of a knife blade, just trying to make this thing work. To say it's going to be perfect, you know, here I am. I got that little, see how I got just that little bit left, you know, right there. Looks pretty good around the Buddha ear, right? Looks okay here, top and bottom. Okay, going around the Buddha ear and going to just smooth it out up to the back door, and hopefully there is no trimming required up to this back door. Now, I thought about repainting the frame around the door and the hinge. You know, it's a little scuffed. The paint isn't all there. And maybe someday I'll do that. You know, maybe someday I'll get a brush and I'll get to match the paint and I'll brush it on. But then it's going to look like it's brushed on, okay? And it is a 68-year-old camera. And, you know, you want the grip to look nice. I mean, when that's not looking good, I mean, that stands out big time. But, you know, but the back, you know, it has history. This camera has some history. Do I want to get rid of all the history? I don't think so. I think I'm going to, for now, leave that black frame and the edges the way they are. And I'm going to finish wrapping now this other side. Now here it's tricky because you got a pin. Yeah, you got this little pin and you got to get the leather around that. And if this thing is very, oh, that dropped right in so nice. That was a little scary. That was a little scary. I think the best word to use for what I'm trying to do here is finesse. You got to be slow and methodical, and don't rush it. And like I said, in some cases you might have to do. I mean, I'm talking a thousandth of an inch or something extremely small to seat this leatherette. And you want to definitely push down on the corners. And if you get it curling up a little bit and you got to trim it, like I see an area against this back door where there's a little bit of curling up, I'm going to try pushing down first with the back side of the knife in case I can tuck it underneath that edge of the door panel and try to avoid trimming it if possible. And really, you know, push in on it. I got a little bit of excess over here near the Buddha ear that I might have to trim. Very, I'm talking a whisker. And of course, you know, if I touch myself with the doggone knife, you know, I'm going to bleed because I'm on blood thinner. That can make a big mess out of things quickly. Yeah. Yeah, so now I got to fight my blood loss here and not get blood all over the camera. Very fine job of manufacturing. Very fine job. So, here we go. We're going to show you the finished product. So, let me angle it right here. Oh, here's the front. We're going to get as close as we can here. Okay. You can see the screws. So here's the front. There's the Buddha ear wrapping around to the door frame. And we pick it up on the other side, where not only did we have the Buddha ear to deal with, but we had to deal with this bottom pin. Very little leather underneath that bottom pin, very thin. So you don't want to be stretching this thing much at all. And like I said, if you got a couple thousandths, you know, you just change your X-Acto blade. Notice this is now nice and pointy and sharp. It's not the chisel one that I had on earlier when I took off the Vulcanite. And just be very patient with it. And you end up with what really looks like a brand new stinking camera. Pretty darn close. You can see I took off the exposure meter, one less thing to have in my face, and there are a few slight scuffs, you know, I think from sliding, very hard to see, but they're there. Just from sliding that on and off. But this camera is truly in fantastic shape. And now it looks as good as it works. So I highly recommend, if I could take the risk of doing it, anybody can. Just take your time. And that's that. This camera model had what they called the Buddha ears, and they're actually riveted on the camera body to facilitate attachment of your camera strap. The M3 was and still is to many considered to be the best 35mm camera ever made, and it was made from 1954 through 1967. Now the M3 camera had 3 sets of frame lines built into it. 50mm, 90mm, and 135mm. The 50mm frame lines were always visible when you look through the rear of the camera, and depending on which of the other lenses you put on, you would then see those set of frame lines in there as well. Now, when they came out with the M2, they changed it. Instead of being 50, 90, and 135, they made it 35, 50, and 90. And then the M4 came out, and that had 4 frame lines, had the 35, 50, 90, and 135. So I have the Sumeron 35mm f3.5 with what they call goggle attachment. That corrects the field of view so that you're seeing, the 35mm representation. My 28mm lens, if I want to use that, that's f5.6. I have to put on the external accessory shoe, the 28mm viewfinder that fits on the accessory shoe for compositional purposes only. Now, a few people have written or stated in the past, you don't know what a camera is until you handle and use a Leica. And of course, prior to now, I did not have this experience, nor have I ever held one. What I found was a relatively hefty, solid, and extremely well-built mechanical camera, built to tight tolerances, and did not compromise in its design. A truly wonderful camera to enjoy. From the silky smooth film advance lever, I've got the single stroke model, to a shutter that's whisper quiet and takes you by surprise, especially compared to other models of cameras that were out back in that day, which were considerably louder, although for the most part a lot cheaper as well. Now, many say to this day the M3 viewfinder at 0.91 times magnification is the biggest, brightest, sharpest, and most accurate viewfinder on any M series camera ever made up to this point in time. I can't vouch for that personally since I don't own any of those, nor will I. But it wouldn't surprise me if that's true. It's truly impressive, and I own a fair amount of rangefinder cameras, believe me. The focusing patch is large and well-defined and extremely accurate with its focusing precision. The lenses, of course, are well-respected, extremely well-respected and fantastic quality, and run neck and neck with the best from Zeiss. Now, many of the other lens manufacturers or camera manufacturers didn't meet that high bar for lens quality, but I would say Nikon was the exception to that rule, as their lenses were really especially for their competition in the Nikon S, SP, S2, S3, those rangefinder cameras, those lenses were to many as good, equal to whatever Leica and Zeiss had at the time. But, what impressed me the most about this camera was here was a camera that was sitting in a bag for 15 years. And it worked as if it was brand new. I mean, yeah, it needed to be cleaned and whatnot, but I mean, functionally, it appeared to work perfectly. And I've since, obviously shot a roll of film in it, and everything works great. Not a problem at all. Other than the Vulcanite needing to be replaced, the other thing that really blew me away was I've never had a camera this old that when I looked through the viewfinder, There was no internal haze, and there wasn't one speck of dust. I mean, nothing. Nothing. So, you know, clean the outside surface of the rangefinder window, front and rear, clear as a bell, bright as can be, perfect. So, you know, part of the cost of this camera, one can argue, is justified in the fact that you can pass it down to the next generation, and it's still going to work. With no electronics to fail, its only downside, obviously, is technology, which with camera designs now and technology changing what seems like by the minute, never mind over the last 68 years, this camera will forever be stuck in the past. But I'm okay with that. For me, that's just fine. It forces you to be more selective of your subject, more patient and methodical with your approach. No 30 or 120 frames per second or more. It's not that kind of camera, and never was. Never meant to compete with, you know, what a lot of us talk about, you know, sports photography, wildlife photography. I mean, this is a street photographer's dream, and great for everyday moments and portrait shooting outside. I mean, it's really, really nice. Now, the only disadvantage it has is that when you get to the wider wide-angle lenses, you have to have that accessory shoe-mounted viewfinder for the composition. So you still focus through the rangefinder window. Okay, you're going to line up the, you know, you got the rangefinder square, and it's going to split the image, and you're going to line up your image so they line up with each other, what you see in the viewfinder. Very easy to do with this camera, but then you got to look through the one on the hot shoe to determine your composition for the wide angle lenses. Now, of course, the disadvantage of that is if you do have to put a viewfinder on top of your accessory shoe, aka hot shoe, but in this case it's a cold shoe, then the problem you have is you can't put the Leica exposure meter on top, because that uses the same accessory shoe. So that's a negative. Now, if you put the, like I said, so you have that issue with the 28 millimeter, you got to put it on the cold shoe. The 35 you don't, you have the goggles. But later in this video, near the end, I'll tell you if this camera was worth the money for me 68 years later, or for that matter, was it worth what it sold for in 1957? In 1957, the M3 with a 50 millimeter 1.4 cost around $500. And depending on where you do your research, that number is either there or higher. Now, the average weekly salary in 1957 for men was $90 a week. So that was over 5 weeks' pay. Obviously not affordable for an average worker, never mind those that made less than the $90 a week. But of course, that's not who Leica catered to. Leica made, you know, what they felt was a handmade, uncompromising camera. It was going to cost what it cost. And, you know, if you could afford it, great. If you couldn't, well, then you had to buy from somebody else. Basically, that's what it came down to. A B&H photo ad in 1983 showed a Nikon FE2 body at $260. An F3 body was $415. A Leica R4 was $900, and the M4-P was $930. The M3 shocked the world at Photokina event in West Germany on April of 1954, as they had the M3 on display, where the 0.91 times extremely bright and clear viewfinder that we talked about earlier, and all the other benefits of bayonet lens mount system instead of the L39 thread, with the switchable frame lines that automatically changed after you installed the lens, auto parallax correction, and you either had a 2-stroke smooth film advance lever or a single stroke depending on what model year you had. And you had that unique Vulcanite body and shape, and it far surpassed the Nikon S, which is who they were targeting at the time. And even though that was a great camera, Leica had the advantage of seeing that camera out there and knowing where they had to make improvements, and they certainly did. Now, after 8 years of research, Nikon wasn't going to sit back and get run over. After 8 years of research, the Nikon S2 appeared after the debut of the M3 and was considered at the time one of the best rangefinder cameras, period. Now, it was followed up by the Nikon SP in September of 1957. The SP, the P stood for professional, and that stood toe-to-toe with the M3 easily. It took part in the Brussels Expo of 1958, held from April to October, in which 40 countries participated. The Nikon SP, as well as Nikkor lenses and optical glass, won the Grand Prix award. It's well known that overall, as the years went by, Leica kind of started to fall behind technology-wise compared to Canon, Nikon, and even the Minoltas of the world, as they themselves, who created the autofocus system, sold the technology to Minolta, and we all know how that worked out. Eventually, they used Minolta body designs and electronics for many of the SLR Leicas, especially the ones that needed extensive electronics, because they got that electronics from Minolta. Also, the CL rangefinders, which were a compact and cheaper alternative to the M cameras. The mindset at Leica when not pursuing autofocus was that a real photographer knows how to manually focus. A bit pompous, perhaps, but it is what it is. I mean, that was the mindset. And I'm going to show you some pictures I took with the M3 with black and white film. I'm not going to disparage the manufacturer of the film, but let's just say I bought a 200 speed film because I knew I was going to be shooting in the early to mid-morning time frame. I didn't want to use a 400 speed film, and I thought the 200 would work out well. And while I'm happy with what I shot, I'm not happy with how they came out, because the film was extremely grainy. I mean, it was really for people that liked a lot of grain, and so it did not fit my personal taste, but that's what I have on the first roll that I shot with the camera, so unfortunately that's what you're going to see. But it's not, there's definitely a lot of grain in these shots. And from there, we'll have further discussion about my conclusions and whether or not is it worth buying a current Leica camera for what they cost. So here's a handful of images. I didn't put them all in here. A small chapel that you can go into. Cross they had on the property leaning against a tree. And then I went into downtown Conway, got a few shots. Another church, obviously much bigger. And this area here was actually maybe 5 minutes from my house, just an old barn. And a sign of the times down here where wherever there's trees, we must knock them down and build houses. Going back to downtown Conway here, we have a storefront with a little bench. Followed by a theater that they used to do plays, an old theater. Now they have plays there, which I've never gone to yet. You have the Carolina Cheese and Provisions. The Trestle Bakery Cafe, which I highly recommend. Really, really good. Good food, good baked goods. And this is just a picture, last one, of an old decomposing railroad track with a house in the background. So the question is, are current day Leicas worth the money? Well, the issue with the high prices of Leicas, compared to, obviously there are other high-end cameras, high-price cameras like Hasselblad's and some other medium format cameras can be up there in price, but the thing is that when they were priced high in the old days, they were mechanical cameras. You're going to pass them down to your kids. Your kid may or may not use them, but, they're usable. They're workable. They might need a CLA, but they'll come right back to life and they'll work fine. The problem with anything electronic, it doesn't matter whether you have a Nikon Z9 or a Canon R1 or a Sony A9 III or anything electronic. Working in the electronics industry for over 40 years, it is not likely that $10,000 or $9,000 Leica is going to be working if you were in your 30s buying it and you thought you'd give it to your kid 30, 40 years later. The electronics fail all the time. It's not if, it's just when. So it's a different experience. You got to look at it, I think, a little bit differently when you're buying a camera now versus when you were buying a camera then. And the other thing is the storage media as well. What is storage media going to be 30 years from now? Would you be able to get storage media for any of the cameras we use today 30 years from now, other than what you kept that might still work? I saw a comment that someone made about Leica in general, and they just said, well, kind of like due to, limited life expectancy and obsolescence factors, they should really sell the bodies cheaper and make their money on their glass. Well, that sounds well and good, but that isn't happening yet. Anyway, it's just not there. It's just harder to justify the cost of the current models, in my opinion. What you get in return versus the competition, which could be as good or better imaging for half the price. Now, to me, if you're a working pro and you're pulling in good bucks, you can justify the purchase maybe, whether it be 2025 or back in 1957. But let's be honest, it's an extravagant luxury brand that few can afford. It's much like a Rolex watch. It's a product that one may purchase as much for the experience you feel shooting it, as much as for the results that you get with it. And can you put a price on feeling good? Well, eventually, some people do have to, yeah. And of course, it's a status symbol to some as well. This is all the ultimate argument that, let's just say, on any product that an average person may dream of but can't afford. You could say the same thing, like I said, about a Hasselblad camera, or back in the day, even a Raleigh Flex TLR versus, buying a TLR from many of the other camera companies, which were all significantly cheaper. I know when I was young, I couldn't afford a Nikon. It wasn't going to happen. Okay. I had numerous cheaper brands, but I did enjoy, as you guys know, I'm a big Minolta fan, but I had Minolta, I had Fujica, I had an OM1, I had a lot of different brands, but none of them were priced like a Nikon, and certainly none of them were priced like a Leica. So, what was my shooting experience, and do I feel what I bought was worth the money? Well, the shooting experience was wonderful, and my only gripe is I'd say it was wonderful minus loading the film. That's going to take me a bit more time to get used to because it's a funky way of loading a film, and but I think once I do it, a couple more times, I'll have it down pretty pat. The feel and weight of the camera for me was just right, even without a grip. I didn't like go nuts not having a grip. I know on new cameras now everybody buys that little thumb gadget that slides into your hot shoe. I wouldn't want something like that. I wouldn't want to put the stress on the hot shoe itself while I have my thumb against that. To be honest with you, getting a wraparound grip, that's built into an add-on bottom plate or what have you, that's a different story. The film advance lever is wonderful, quiet, effortless, smooth. I talked about the viewfinder being so good and everything. The bonus for me in buying this was it has a working light meter. It still performs well. I mean, when I took all the shots, the first thing I did when I brought it in scanned images and brought them into Lightroom was I looked at my histograms on every shot, and for the most part, there was minimal, if any, clipping of blacks or whites on any of those images. I had to do my normal, adjust the whites, adjust the blacks a little bit, and only in extreme lighting situations where I had an extremely bright portion of the scene and an extremely dark portion of the scene on the same image was that a challenge. But I'll tell you, 95%, it was right there. I mean, that old exposure meter is pretty darn accurate. I mean, I would use it again and not worry about it. Now, also, I think another complaint might be I didn't realize how long it would take to rewind a roll of 36 exposure film using the old, pull up the knob and turn it. I felt like I could have watched an hour-long movie before I got that film rewound into the cartridge again. But other than that, I certainly wouldn't want to be shooting with it all day and winding the film and winding the film and winding the film versus it was a blessing, when eventually you had a rewind crank that showed up on these camera bodies. But there was always a concern back in the day. They were concerned about doing a rewind crank because many manufacturers thought people would go too fast with it, would generate some static electricity, a static charge could develop and cause some damage to the film. Now, was the camera and lenses I bought worth the money? The short answer is yes, but it could have easily been no. So, why the yes vote? Well, I got an extraordinary deal considering I got 5 lenses, exposure meter, a case, some filters, some PC sync adapters for what many would pay what I paid for a body alone, in some cases even without a lens on it. So as a collector, it was a no-brainer, even though I had to do, some Vulcanite replacement and a lot of cleaning. Now, if I paid, let's say, the pricing was more towards 80% of what I see this stuff selling for or being asked for on eBay, I probably wouldn't have bought it. I wouldn't have bought it. While this camera is going to see some use, it's not going to be used as a daily camera. not enough for me to justify if I had to pay a very high level of cost for this stuff. I would have passed. Like I said earlier, this camera is, even as a used item, for many, is still a luxury item for most of us. And many are going to use their modern digital cameras the majority of the time, and these cameras are going to be delegated to occasional use when they want to gear down and enjoy the art of photography, slow the pace down, change their mindset for a weekend of shooting with a vintage camera. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't some people that shoot film all the time. There are, and there's nothing wrong with that. I have no issues with people that shoot film all the time. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. Now, in the end, another thing to throw out is, for me, question to myself is, are there any other rangefinder cameras I want to own? I can only think of two. The first one being the Minolta 35, which was Minolta's first 35mm interchangeable lens rangefinder camera, circa 1947. Hard to find a decent one of the original, and they have Rev A, I think, through F, and then from there they have a version 2 models that came out, and more after that, which those you can find fairly plentiful. But I do have a affinity towards Minolta, of course. People know that. The second camera that I'd like to get is an original Nikon SP rangefinder. That could really go toe-to-toe with this Leica M3. Some features definitely better. Some probably equal. A few that might not be as good. Circa 1957. It had a 1:1 finder, and it had 50, 85, 105, and 135mm frame lines when you look through the main part of the rangefinder window. And then you had a secondary window that you could look through that gave you frame lines, albeit very small. I mean, hard for someone with glasses probably to see through it, but offered you frame lines for 35mm and 28mm lenses as well. And it did have auto parallax correction as well. And I'm not going to sit here and do a comparison or say which is better than the other, because if you're lucky enough to own either, in my opinion, you should be very, very happy. And if you own both, I mean, pinch yourself. Make sure it's not a dream. And that's where we'll end it. So here I am, just to say thank you if you stayed awake long enough to watch this whole thing. I appreciate it. A lot of time and research and effort was put into putting this together. And so I apologize for it being so long, but it is what it is. But I do want to do a call out to a few folks. I want to thank Prestige Camera in Japan, which is where I got the leather, the template for the camera. I think it was a great job. It really worked out well. So I want to tip my hat to them. And I also a huge thank you and shout out to a gentleman named Brian Wester, who is the owner and operator of Coast to Coast Antiques Gallery here in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, which is where I was able to not only get this M3, but other cameras as well. And actually, here we are on the 13th of March as I'm concluding this video. And I was there yesterday to show him how the camera looked once I got done with it. He was really, really shocked and pleased and appreciative that obviously I am going to hang on to it for me. I'm not going to flip it. And really liked how it came out. And but he was a gentleman and gave me a fantastic deal on something that I never thought I would ever be able to afford to buy, never mind with everything that was in it. So I thank him again very much. And if you're ever in the Myrtle Beach area, he has a lot of great products in his store. I'm a big fan of the old style cranberry glass, and he has a lot of cranberry glass. And if you're a comic nerd, you know, he's got a lot of comic books too, and I'm also a comic nerd, so what can I say? But until next time, everybody, have a good one. And as I say, enjoy life, capture some of it, get out there and take pictures. And oh, I did have a pinch me moment. Oh, yeah. I got myself a Nikon SP, an original. So, I guess how I want to end this is the journey continues.